We all know that society has tried to make it clear that weightlifting doesn't make you bulky, but what they don't address is the fact that bulky is subjective. It could be completely different to everybody. So what I see as muscular, strong, and what I strive for, somebody else could look at and be like, I think that's a little bit too bulky for my liking. I don't like it. If you don't know me, my name is Haley. I'm your realistic and balanced bestie, helping you build a stronger brain and body. Welcome back to Healing with Hale, where we talk about everything we need to help us heal, feel, and train our way into a stronger brain and body. It's a hot trend on TikTok right now to be like, hot take, weightlifting actually did make me bulky. So today we're gonna break down why weightlifting might have made you bulky and how you can combat this. We're also gonna dive in a little bit to the science of what actually happens in your body when you start weightlifting. So let's just get into it. The biggest thing that I'm sure you've heard by now is that you can't tone a muscle. The whole concept of being toned is actually just essentially a body recomposition, which is the art of losing fat and gaining muscle at the same time. Body recomp could be a whole video in itself, but it is possible and it is doable. And just know that muscle is the tone that everybody is after. So if you look at someone and you're like, oh my God, they look so toned, I want to look like that, that is because they have muscle. And there's no specific strength training, rep range, or magical exercise or anything that makes somebody toned versus making them look bulky. That purely comes down to a few other factors here. So first, we're going to talk about genetics because we can't talk about muscle without talking about genetics. Obviously, we all know that genetics is a huge factor in how our body responds to literally anything. So it makes sense that our body's going to respond to training differently based on the person. But I think a common misconception is that certain exercises make you have a certain body type. But in reality, a lot of times people are just drawn to certain forms of exercises because of the body type that they already have. For example, we hear a lot about swimmer's body, but the reality is that a lot of swimmers just naturally have that body, and that is why they excel at swimming so much. Same goes for basketball, and honestly, same goes for Pilates a lot of times. Now, of course, you can enjoy any exercise with any body type, but this is just important to remember when you're looking at somebody and you're seeing their body type and you think that it's because of a specific exercise that they're doing. And it's just important to remember that they might just be genetically predisposed to being better at that exercise. It's not always because they're doing something differently than you are. And speaking of genetics, I want to talk about the theory that I have created in my brain because I really don't have any backing other than what I've seen from training over 200, 300 people over the past few years. But I noticed that people are either anteriorly gifted or posteriorly gifted. And by this, I mean that I think people are either more gifted to putting muscle on the front of their body, meaning shoulders, chest, and quads, or they're gonna be more inclined to putting muscle on the back side of their body, meaning they gain muscle in their back and their butt and their hamstrings a little bit faster. Again, this is kind of just my theory, but I really have seen it reign true almost every single time. So if you notice that you put on muscle on one side or the other side a little bit easier, you can use this knowledge to kind of tweak your exercises to favor the ones that you're less dominant in. So if you know that your quads and your shoulders gain muscle really easily, maybe you focus only one day on those and then you focus 2 days on the back side of your body. The key here is that it's really up to you. It is your journey at the end of the day. So if you notice that you're getting muscle built up in an area a little bit more than you would like, don't decrease the weight that you lift, just decrease the frequency that you're working on that area. You're not gonna magically tone down that area by doing 30, 40, 50 reps of something and doing really light weights. You still wanna make sure that you're lifting heavy, but you're just gonna do it a little bit less frequently. So for me, I noticed that last year I was building my upper body a little bit faster than I was building my lower body. And again, genetics, but I switched to a 4-day lower body program and a 2-day upper body program because I just wanted better proportions of my physique. And this is obviously something that fully depends on your workout split in general and just how many days you're working out. But for me, that was something that made sense for me at the time. I don't do that anymore. I'm working everything equally, but for a little bit, I did have to switch it up because I just felt like I was getting a little bit unproportional. So in general, if you're past the 3-month time frame and you think that something is growing a little bit faster than you like, then you can decrease your frequency of working on that muscle group. But you might be sitting here thinking, what 3-month time frame are you talking about? Where the fuck did this come from? Let me explain. So when you first start lifting weights, a few things happen in your body. And a lot of times if someone isn't experienced, isn't working with a coach, or just isn't patient patient, they mistake these things for them becoming bulky or them putting on weight. And then that causes them to be turned off to lifting forever, and they think it's a scam, and they're just like, oh my God, I hate that so much, I'm never doing it again. So let's talk about these reasons that you might think you're becoming bulky. Number one, your muscle is growing. And this might seem like an obvious thing, but a lot of times we don't understand what's actually happening when we build muscle. And I really blame the whole myth that you can turn fat into muscle, because I really think that's where so much of our confusion around this topic comes from. And it's just so important to note that muscle gain and fat loss are two completely separate processes that are happening in your body. Yes, they can happen simultaneously, but they are separate. And muscle is obviously going to be more solid and harder than fat. So a lot of times people are like, oh, my clothes are fitting tighter. And in reality, that's just proof that you're building muscle. Because if you think about it, your untrained body parts and areas that might have a little bit more fat on them are going to easily squeeze into clothes a little bit better than a newly formed, hardened muscle is going to squeeze into those same clothes. And this doesn't mean your clothes are going to fit like that forever, because once you lose the fat that's still there, you'll notice such an improvement on how the clothes fit you, because you only have that muscle there now, and it's not the muscle and the fat both on your body. And that brings me to point number two, which is that muscle gain takes longer than the fat loss portion. Hypertrophy, which is the act of growing a muscle, might take 2 to 3 months to notice a difference and see that muscle being built, while the fat loss portion might take 3 to 6 months to start noticing a difference. So you might have both of these processes at the same time, and it's possible that you might experience up to a 6-month time period where you're like, holy shit, why do I look bigger? But as long as you stick to your eating habits and your training routine, you will see that fat come off eventually, and you'll have nothing left but the muscle there eventually. Obviously, that's a bit of an oversimplification, because we all know it's not that easy, but in theory, under the right circumstances, that is what's going to happen as long as you inevitably stick to your program. Reason number 3 that you might think you're getting bulkier is that muscle retains water. So lifting weights causes stress on our muscles. That's kind of the whole point of lifting, right? So when you cause this stress, the tissues around that muscle swell up, and they draw water in to try to soothe the inflammation there. Now, this can be seen as a good thing when it's in an area that we want. That's why you might hear people be like, oh my God, I have such a good pump right now, I look so good. But sometimes, especially early on, when we don't really have a muscle to be pumped up yet, the last thing that we want is extra swelling around an area that we're trying to target. And unfortunately, early on, the swelling might even last for a few days, because your muscles just aren't used to the micro tears that are caused when you start working out. So your body's going to take a little bit longer to repair those micro tears. But the good news is that as you stay consistent and as you keep lifting, your muscle repair speed is going to improve, and the swelling will be a little bit less intense. Reason number 4 is this bulky effect doesn't only happen when you weightlift. Unfortunately, you might notice this bulkiness even if you're sticking to a cardio-based or like a high-intensity workout routine. What we commonly refer to as water retention is actually just a phenomenon that happens where an increase in cardio causes an increase in your blood volume. This means that within 24 hours of your cardio exercise, something called exercise-induced hypervolemia, stay with me, I'm not going to go full science on you. Hypervolemia occurs and can take up to 2 to 4 weeks to stabilize. When you do a cardio workout and your core temperature gets higher, your kidneys start retaining water to try to prevent dehydration. This causes an immediate increase in your plasma volume, which then, within a week or two, is followed by an increase in your red blood cells, which can add up to anywhere from 0.5 to 2 pounds of total body weight. Now, don't let this scare you off cardio, because this increase is a good thing due to the fact that an increase in blood volume is actually going to increase your aerobic capacity, and this blood volume increase is going to stay with you as long as you maintain your cardio routine, but the swelling will pass. So just like with weightlifting, you unfortunately just have to stay patient. Reason number 5 you might feel bulkier is you might be eating more, because you have an increased appetite when you start lifting, and that's because lifting weights can increase your body's metabolic rate for up to 36 hours, which means you're burning more calories while at rest, and that is going to make you feel more hungry. So if you're not tracking calories here, you might be overeating, which is inevitably going to cause a bloated or more fuller appearance. And number 6 on the opposite end of this list is you might feel bulky because you're under eating, and that's because your total daily energy expenditure changes when you start working out. When your total daily energy expenditure, aka the amount of calories that your body requires, increases, that means that you need to increase the amount of food that you're eating alongside this, otherwise you're actually going to be under eating in comparison to your new maintenance calories. Now, unfortunately, the real problem here is that a lot of people don't know whether they're overeating or under eating, because they're not either properly tracking, they're not working with a coach, or they just really don't know what they're doing and they're just not really paying attention to the nutrition side of it. And while I don't think it's absolutely necessary to track your calories, I do think that if you are in a situation where you're like, I really feel like I'm getting bulkier, or I really feel like I'm not making any progress right now, that is a time where it's almost vital to really narrow in on your nutrition and really start to try to track and see where your baseline is at, because that's going to give us some real insight onto what's going on in your body. And it does take a little bit of playing around there to be like, okay, let's increase the calories by 100 calories for this week and see what happens here. Maybe we'll take it back down 200 calories this week, see what happens here. Because nutrition is such a nuanced topic and there's so many little details to it, I am just gonna kind of keep it at that. But just know that unfortunately, there are two sides of that coin there, where you might be overeating and you might be undereating. The undereating will also cause a look of puffiness because it's going to cause your body to hold on to fat in an effort to make sure that it's not starving. Reason number 7 that you might feel a little bit bulky is that you're not sleeping enough. Lack of sleep causes many things, including the lack of time for your body to properly repair your muscles and grow those muscles, but it can also cause an increase in your ghrelin levels, which is essentially your body's hunger cue. So you might even feel hungrier on the days that you got little sleep, which again can lead to overeating if you're not tracking properly. Again, not trying to make you think that you absolutely have to track, but I am just saying that there are reasons here. So if you are looking for answers, I am just giving them to you. Reason number 8 that you might feel a little bit bulkier is that you're not eating enough fiber. And this is actually just something that I think in general, a lot of people aren't eating enough fiber. Not getting enough fiber can really just cause a bloated appearance, and depending on your genetics, it can cause this bloating in any area of your body. So upping your fiber is a huge way to help combat this and also just help your digestion improve. In fact, so many of the greens powders that you see broadcasted everywhere are just glorified fiber powders. And when people try the greens and they're like, oh my god, it's magically de-bloating me, that's crazy, they're really just seeing fiber do its damn job. That's literally it. So get your fiber intake up before you overthink your bloating. Reason number 9 is going to be specific to the people who are not on any form of hormonal birth control. You might be looking at your body at completely different times of your cycle. And by now we all know that even if you don't cycle sync, you do still experience different bodily effects during different times of the month. Again, if you're someone who actually has a natural cycle and isn't hormonally stopping your cycle. So if you're comparing your ovulation phase to your luteal phase body, of course you're gonna think that you got bulky or fluffy or heavier because your body is retaining more water during your luteal phase of your cycle. And your hormonal fluctuation can also cause bloating and a weight increase of up to 10 pounds during your luteal phase. And this is why I recommend everyone who is tracking their cycle or just a little bit aware of when their period is coming to know what part of their cycle they're at when they take their progress pictures. And whenever possible, I like to only compare my own pictures and my clients' pictures to photos that are from that same phase of their cycle. So I might compare my January luteal phase to my March luteal phase, but I wouldn't compare my January luteal phase to my February ovulation phase, because that honestly might as well just be a whole different person in those two photos. Overall, the keys to overcoming this bulky appearance that you might feel like you have are to eat at your maintenance calories, and I mean really stick to it, and be fucking honest with your tracking. If you're tracking, you want to push yourself hard during your workouts, because if you're not pushing, you're not building muscle, which is quite literally the entire goal here. You unfortunately have to be so patient, and if you think that you're getting too bulky for your individual preference, don't decrease the weights that you lift, just decrease your frequency. That is all, my beautiful people. Until next time, be kind to your mind, to your body, and to others, and happy healing. There is a freaking gnat in here and it's driving me insane.